Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. It has been a wild week in the news. Republicans are already in a near civil war over the Obamacare repeal. The president has accused his predecessor of spying on him, perhaps illegally, and WikiLeaks humiliated the CIA. All these headlines have overshadowed a bunch of other stories, one of which we're going to open with tonight. As it happens, the effort to kill Obamacare is not the only contentious part of the new Republican health care bill. The American Health Care Act would also cut off federal funding for Planned Parenthood. That amounts to more than $500 million a year, about 40% of its budget. Planned Parenthood is the nation's largest abortion provider by far, so unsurprisingly, those who view abortion as the linchpin of human freedom are upset about it. The Trump administration says it will happily restore the funding to Planned Parenthood as long as it stops providing abortions. The group says it's not interested in that. Jimmy Green was a candidate in the recent race for DNC chair. She's also a former board member of Planned Parenthood Action Fund in New York City, and she joins us live tonight. Jimmy, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker.
So the Planned Parenthood line is that abortions are just a small part of what Planned Parenthood does, all the vital services they provide, and that's why they need federal funding. The Trump administration is saying, okay, then just don't provide abortions and you get your $500 million a year of taxpayer money. Why wouldn't they do that? If it's just a small part of what they do and the rest is so important, why not just get rid of the abortions?
Well, Tucker, I think we should start with being honest with your audience that there is no such thing as a federally funded abortion. There is a law that prohibits that from happening, and so that is certainly not something that Planned Parenthood supports as legislation, but they abide by it. Now, to your question of Planned Parenthood's line.
Since you moved off the topic, let me just ask you a question. If you didn't like the NRA's lobbying for the Second Amendment, but the U.S. government gave the NRA $500 million a year in taxpayer funding, and they said, well, it has nothing to do with our lobbying for the Second Amendment, it's just for something else that we do, gun safety, you would say correctly, money is fungible. Of course, it subsidizes the things that I don't like. And the same is true of Planned Parenthood. As you know, it's money. It's like liquid. It flows wherever it needs to go.
You know where that money is flowing? It's flowing to cancer screenings. It's flowing to STD screenings and testing. Right. It's flowing to make sure that in places where healthcare providers are scarce and health professionals are scarce, Planned Parenthood is in many ways the #1 source of healthcare.
Okay.
And I heard you at the top of the segment say that this is Planned Parenthood's line. I would ask you to go to any woman in your life and see what her line is on Planned Parenthood, because there are 2.5 million women each year that are served by Planned Parenthood's health centers.
Okay.
This is not an issue of removing these funds and there will be another place for these women to go. It's proven that that's not the case.
Okay,
it's
so I'm taking everything you say
at face.
I'm taking everything you say at face.
Okay.
Wait, let me stop and agree with you by saying I'm taking what you say at face value, whether or not it's true. I'm just going to stipulate that it's true. Why then won't Planned Parenthood just say, because what we do is so very important, we're the only healthcare provider, as you just said, in some places in this country, assuming that's true, but let's just say it is, why wouldn't you just get rid of the abortions? Why are abortions so important to Planned Parenthood? If the rest of what they do is more important, why not just give up the abortions? Everyone will be happy. They can continue to do cancer screenings. Why won't they do that? I don't understand.
Tucker, abortions are a legal medical procedure.
Well, that's not an answer,
in this country. And that is something that you're going to have to just reckon with, because there's a lot of talk. I've heard you on your show, Tucker, say so many times, look, Donald Trump won and we need to stop litigating this election. Well, guess what?
I've never said that, actually.
The question of the legality of abortions was decided before the two of us were even born. This is a legal medical procedure.
First of all, I was born in 1970. Stop. You just undercut your own argument. You just said it is the law that taxpayer dollars do not fund abortion. Now, it's the law for a reason, because we don't as a country consider abortion just like any other medical procedure. I'm not contesting its legality. I'm aware of what Roe v. Wade says. I'm merely asking you the same question for the third time, which is, if Planned Parenthood services are so vital, it's non-abortion related services, what is the attachment to abortion? Why doesn't Planned Parenthood just say, we do so many great things, we'll let other people provide the abortions, and if you're interested in supporting that, you can donate money to those groups. Why will they not let go?
Tucker, seriously.
Why?
Let's look
Presumably,
at,
Jammu,
because of Planned Parenthood
if what
and the
they are
services they
doing
provide
is
and,
so
and the
important.
education that they provide in communities and even in schools, unintended
You're not
pregnancies
going to answer my question, are you?
are down. Why
Okay.
is it, answer this question, Tucker, why is it that you are so against big government on every issue except for when it comes to my uterus and my vagina? Can you imagine if the government
So
was saying, let's legislate your penis? That is not ever going to be allowed by you or any of your male counterparts. And it is time that we get past this
these
issue.
talking points
that this
are
is
decades
no, these are
old
not talking
and not
points.
very
The talking
bright.
points.
Look, let me just can we get back to the issue of Planned Parenthood funding, and if you could just slow down the Jeremiah a bit. I ask you for, and I'm going to give up after this, a fourth time. You're saying that Planned Parenthood does all these great things. The federal government is saying we'll continue to fund those great things. But we're really worried about the abortion part because like almost half the country thinks it's murder. It's not about genitalia, it's about a distinct human being. That's the view of a lot of Americans.
70% of Americans are pro-choice. And guess what? 50% of Donald Trump voters don't want Planned Parenthood to be defunded.
Wrong.
And guess what?
But
Abortion is also a critical legal medical procedure.
Really?
So let's talk about the domino effect.
Wait,
you take
Jammu,
abortions away.
You're not going to answer any of these questions.
Okay, so then what? Because life is actually more complex than you want to talk about in this situation. So
if you take abortions away, hold on, slow down. Why should people who think abortion is immoral, and there are a lot of them, it's not 30%, it's much higher than that actually, it's about 50%, but it's still more than 5%, why should those people have to see their tax dollars subsidize it? That's the question. And you're basically answering with a religious answer.
That's not
and saying
true,
it has to do with the
Tucker.
autonomy of the
Their
woman.
tax dollars are not paying for
But what's the
abortions.
problem?
You know
Why
what their
not give
tax
up
dollars are
abortion? I
paying
don't-
for?
I don't
They're
understand.
paying for low-income women to be able to go into a health center in a community that has no other health center available to them within hundreds of miles so that they can get a breast cancer screening.
Oh,
so
really? A
that they
mammogram?
can
How many
get
mammograms
an
do they get?
STD screening. That they can get tested. And this is not only women. This is men.
How many? Are they giving a lot of mammograms at Planned Parenthood? How many do you think last year they gave?
I don't have that exact number.
I don't think
Tucker,
they did any, actually. I don't think they did any mammograms, did they?
Tucker,
or did they? It's a question for you. You were on the board of it, not me.
Let's be honest.
Do you not have the answer, Jammu? I'm trying to get the answer from you.
Health centers in rural areas, in many communities where there are no other
How many mammograms are they providing? You were on the board. Wait, so stop with the propaganda. I'm asking you a specific question.
This is not propaganda. I'm trying to be honest with your audience. You're talking points to demean an organization that provides
I'm trying to get a straight answer out of you. All right. I give up. Thanks, Jammu. I appreciate it. Get back to me on the mammogram question. I appreciate it. Well, building a wall doesn't seem to be a big priority in Congress. 2 nights ago, the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, didn't list paying for the wall as a priority until we mentioned it to him. Well, Washington dithers. Here's what's happening south of the border. In Los Cabos, the popular resort town, 6 murder victims have been found in the past 2 days alone. 3 of the victims had apparently been wrapped in plastic bags after being tortured. A man and a woman also found in that city shot to death near the airport. Elsewhere in Mexico, 87 people were arrested for alleged participation in a murderous kidnapping ring known as the Buckhands. What happens to these bad hombres? How do we keep them out of the United States? With hope, apparently. Meanwhile, in France, a giant construction conglomerate is being denounced by its own government for daring to bid on a contract that would supply building materials for the wall here in this country. The foreign minister of France warned that company that it should, quote, reflect upon what its interests are, because it has also, quote, social and environmental responsibilities. Coming from the government official for a nuclear-armed power, that is ominous, to say the least. Well, comedian Samantha Bee attacked a cancer patient this week, calling him a Nazi. Up next, we'll talk to a writer who says her worst mistakes are actually being overlooked. And then President Obama has been gone for 50 days now, but there's more talk than ever that the same regime, that regime, is trying to sabotage the current regime, the Trump administration. We've got details next. Kind of a lame joke in the first place, but it turns out that one of the men that she ridiculed, Kyle Coddington, has stage 4 brain cancer. Oops. Most of the backlash against Bee focused on the fact that she attacked a cancer patient, but Joe Concha of The Hill had a smarter take. Regardless of the man's medical status, he asked, why was it okay to call him a Nazi in the first place when he couldn't defend himself? Joe Concha joins us now. So, Joe, this seems consistent with her show, I'm Not a Watcher? Is this kind of thing, is this sort of Just normal joke on the Samantha Bee show?
It's a very hateful show, Tucker. This is what late night has become, unfortunately. It's no longer the days of David Letterman before he became a curmudgeon, or Jay Leno, of course, Johnny Carson. This is what it's about. And look, that is the main focus here. Not so much, they wouldn't have attacked this kid if they knew he had stage 4 cancer and was suffering, going through chemotherapy. Any reasonable person would say that. But when you, on national television, show a 20-year-old college student and you call him a Nazi, in the context of his hair, in the conference that he is attending, here are the consequences that could happen. Take the cancer part out of this. He goes back to campus. Do you think he gets mocked and bullied? Well, given the hostility on college campuses, probably. And then what happens next? He either brushes it off or it goes in another direction that we've seen on so many college campuses, and that is that it spirals into a thought process of possibly even hurting yourself or worse. We saw it at Rutgers in New Jersey, where a kid was exposed as being gay, and before you knew it, he drove up to the George Washington Bridge, Tucker, and he threw himself off. That's how quickly these things can spiral out of control. And Samantha Bee has yet to apologize for calling this kid and other kids there a Nazi. Instead, she does this half-baked apology like, we're sorry we offended you. Hey, Samantha, here's an idea. Why don't you pick up a phone, because this kid has stage 4 cancer. There is no stage 5, and apologize to him directly by phone in your own voice instead of a stupid tweet that wasn't even an apology in the first place. Sorry, I don't get emotional, Tucker, but this really got me angry.
Well, it also seems, and here's the other problem, it doesn't seem very funny. I mean, is this a state of play in late night, kind of political lectures rather than jokes?
Oh, well, I don't know if you caught Stephen Colbert on election night. He does a special on Showtime, and it's supposed to be a celebration of Hillary Clinton's victory. And he doesn't even have any jokes planned if Hillary actually lost. And he doesn't know what to do when it's clear that Trump is going to win. So he has somebody on his panel, and her name is Jana Friedman. She's an alleged comedian. And he says, so how you feeling right now? And let me give you the quote, because this is what comedy is in 2017. She says, I feel as if I'm about to give birth to a baby that's already dead. Ugh. Stephen Colbert is a devout Catholic. We hear it all the time. And instead of him saying, you know what, I get that we're in a politically incorrect world. I get that even if you're pro-choice, you probably find that offensive. He doesn't say anything. Instead, he makes a joke. He says, hey, that's the kind of panel discussion you have on Showtime these days. So that's where we are in 2017, Tucker, where we call strangers Nazis without them defending themselves or having the ability to defend themselves. And if a president or a candidate wins the presidency, then we're comparing it to stillborn births.
So here's something I did find kind of funny. None of that's funny, as far as I'm. This is funny. So I read the other day where Samantha Bee was going after somebody for not being diverse enough. Someone is racist and hasn't reached the elevated moral status of Samantha Bee. Yeah. Everyone's not hiring enough women of color, I think was her accusation. Here's a picture of, I think I took this from your column. Here's Samantha Bee and her writers at one of the endless award ceremonies. Those are her writers. Doesn't seem like a very diverse group to me. Where's the self-awareness here, Joe?
She went after another cable network where he used to work at one time, MSNBC, and said that they don't have enough black women on the network. So, since I'm a journalist, I actually was curious, and I thought, well, gee, I wonder how many black women work for the Samantha Bee Full Frontal show. And I looked at all writing credits and directors and producers, and I found 33 people. Guess how many out of those are African-American women?
I don't know, 25?
One. So but she's preaching about diversity and hiring more black women, and she's 1 for 33.
And calling people Nazis. She's got 33 people writing for her show?
No, it's writers, directors, and segment producers, all in aggregate.
That's a lot. Is her show like 8 hours long? How long is it?
It's once a week, and I believe it's an hour.
Would
you like that kind of staff here? Or do you have the same thing?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I could make my Cocker Spaniel a star with a staff of 33. And it would be more diverse than her staff, I'll tell you that. That's hilarious.
You own a Cocker Spaniel? I didn't see that.
Yeah, we do. Joe, thanks. Great to see you tonight.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Well, there's fresh talk today that holdovers from the Obama administration are doing their best to undermine the current administration. For more detail, we go now to the great Trace Gallagher standing by. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, this was kind of an I told you so moment for some right-wing publications and others who in recent weeks have been bandying about this theory that holdovers from the Obama administration were leaking information to derail the Trump presidency, and that the former president himself was staying in Washington to be actively involved in an alleged shadow government. As soon as the private dinner comments went public, they created a ton of interest. But Congressman Kelly wasn't alone in his suspicions. Today, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said this. Watch.
I don't think it should come as any surprise that there are people that burrowed into government during 8 years of the last administration and, may have believed in that agenda and can want to continue to seek it.
Though Congressman Kelly's office is now trying to walk his comments back a bit, saying, quote, "It is worth clarifying that Representative Kelly does not believe that President Obama is personally operating a shadow government. He does believe it would be helpful to the new administration if the former president would personally call for an end to all leaks and obstruction by personnel from his administration." And we should note today, Attorney General Jeff Sessions asked for the resignations of the 46 remaining Obama-appointed U.S. attorneys in order to ensure what the White House calls a, quote, uniform transition. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher. Thanks, Trace. Well, President Trump has created a new office in the Department of Homeland Security for the sake of tracking crime committed by illegal immigrants here. Well, today, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer reiterated that halting illegal immigration is a top priority for the new president. Watch.
He has made enforcing our nation's immigration laws a top priority, signing executive orders that start work on a southern border wall, that enhance the public safety of Americans through ordering the strong enforcement of immigration laws that are already on the books, halting funding to jurisdictions in the United States that don't comply with federal immigration rules, and directing the Department of Homeland Security to hire a combined 15,000 new officers and agents to support the system and protect the nation.
What a waste of time, said the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Associated Press, and virtually everyone else in Washington. Illegal immigrants, they tell us, commit far fewer crimes than native-born Americans do. Ann Coulter is an author. She spent a lot of time researching this matter, and she says the Times, the Post, and the rest of the press are totally full of it. She joins us now. Ann, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So you are routinely described as a provocateur, but at least on this subject, you're legitimately an expert. You wrote an entire book on this, and there was a lot of original reporting in it. I read it. A lot of other people did. They can vouch for that. So on this specific question, immigrant crime, the Times told us again and again, that's not true. They commit less crimes. What is the fact? What are the numbers on this?
I have all the numbers we have. There aren't very many, and I do think it's quite telling that it's always my side that wants the real numbers, and I hope we'll get them under Attorney General Sessions. I do think that is the entire reason for this hysteria.
Yes.
They absolutely want to take Sessions out because they want to keep this dump of the third world going on America. It's not just that, and there's a lot of evidence that immigrants do commit more crime. Otherwise, I don't think the left would be so hysterical about why are you deporting? Oh, if it's just a small crime. Well,
right.
I don't know. How many small crimes have you committed? And these are guests in our country, but it's also the kind of crimes they're committing. So, I mean, one thing that's been driving me crazy is hearing Paul Ryan. I mean, his specialty is we got to reform entitlements, and that means you Americans, you're going to have to wait longer to collect your Social Security and Medicare, and we're going to have to means test it. So maybe you've been paying in your whole life, but and it's true, it is a Ponzi scheme, but I have another idea, and that is to stop bringing in immigrants whose specialty is committing crimes against our entitlements programs. I was trying to capture this for my book, Adios America. I mean, just start noticing whenever you see a headline. There was one last year, $1 billion stolen from Medicare in Florida. Look at the names and ask yourself, would I have seen these in a phone book in America, 20 years ago? Up in Michigan, it's very heavily Arab. Florida, heavily Hispanic. New York, well, all over. It's Arab, Russian. These aren't crimes we are used to. American criminals are dumb, which gives the police a little bit of an advantage, but they don't understand that in other cultures, it isn't just dumb people who are criminals, and there's a specialty in computer hacking and credit card stealing and ripping off government programs, which it's barely even considered a crime.
But these numbers shouldn't be hard to get because people who are processed through the system, who are arrested, adjudicated, imprisoned, we ought to have numbers on where they're from, what their legal residency is, what their nationality is. Do we have those numbers? They must exist somewhere.
No, they don't. No, it drove me crazy. That's how Adios America became Adios America. Immigration was going to be just one part of that book. I'd already drafted a few chapters for the book I originally was going to write, which I still think is a great idea for a book. Maybe I'll write it someday. And I got to the immigrant crime part because I thought, I mean, isn't that the most basic thing we should know about people we're bringing into our country, people who have no right to be here? Forget about, how much they're contributing to the system or how much they're taking out in welfare. Just how many are committing crimes? What kind of crimes? How much does that cost the country? And I'm a fanatical researcher, and you cannot get that information. Every time I describe the process of what you find when you go looking for it. The census collects all kinds of information. I can tell you, how many Samoans have battery-powered radios, how many Americans have broken stair railings. But if you want to find out how many immigrants are in prison, state or federal, good luck to you.
So, I mean, then clearly this is willful and it's in effect a cover-up. It's what's happening in Sweden right now, where the government makes it a policy to lie about the effect of their immigration policy.
Yes, that's right. And it's not just that we are bringing in criminals. I mean, you'll always hear, even if it were true that immigrants, and I mean legal and illegal, were committing fewer crimes, no, the number we want is 0. We want 0. It's not like we don't want the same number of criminals as the native population. It's crazy. As I've said, it's like, you have bad food in your refrigerator. You don't go out and get other bad food to bring in. No, you can pick any food you want. Get the fresh food. Well, that's us with immigration. Let's get only good immigrants who are smarter, make more money. We ought to be like the Patriots, recruiting players.
Well, exactly. So the other stat that you often see batted down by the New York Times and others is that immigrants consume a lot of welfare benefits. And so the line you often read is actually immigrants, legal and illegal, consume welfare at a lower rate than native-born Americans. Is that true?
No, what they do is define only certain programs as welfare, or there are other tricks. I mean, there are all kinds of lies that are used when it comes to the immigration topic, but one interesting little fact is the 1996 Welfare Reform Bill. As part of that bill, I was working for the Senate Judiciary Committee back then. One of the provisions was immigrants could not collect welfare for the first 5 years they were here. And, across America, people were saying, that's not already the law? No. They were very upset about it at the New York Times, denounced that provision over and over again. That provision, welfare, you can't accept welfare for the first 5 years you're here if you're a guest in our country, was the biggest cost savings of welfare reform. And it's all been overturned by now, by the way. Thank you.
Well, and that's the question. So there's no factual basis to the claim that immigrants consume welfare at a lower rate than Americans.
No, it's quite the opposite. I mean, Center for Immigration Studies has the numbers. I think generally what they're talking about is what used to be called aid to mothers with dependent children. There's one particular, one particular. If you would define all other forms of welfare, subsidized housing, Section 8, food stamps, free health care, if none of that, or Social Security disability, if none of that is called welfare, so they're looking at one program, and also, B, if an illegal alien drops a baby in America, well, that's not an illegal immigrant. It's maybe an immigrant, but suddenly the baby is allegedly an American citizen, something no Congress has ever passed that law, no court has ever upheld that. A child born in America is not a citizen, and I hope Trump starts enforcing what the real law is.
Ann Coulter, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Up next, there's not a lot of evidence that Vladimir Putin hacked the election. Okay, none. But there's plenty that he wants fracking to be banned. We'll talk to a fracking foe about whether his campaign has become a means for Russia to hurt the United States. Well, Vladimir Putin has been routinely accused of, quote, hacking the U.S. election. But he may be trying to hack U.S. energy policy as well. Recent reports by U.S. intelligence stated that the Russian government used Russia Today, its English-language propaganda outlet, to air dozens of anti-fracking documentaries and stories. So if Russian support delegitimizes the presidential campaign and the Trump administration, does it also delegitimize the anti-fracking movement? Scott Edwards is co-director of the Food and Water Justice Project and an anti-fracking activist. He joins us from New York. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Tucker.
So it's a simple question, and it's one that we have to ask in the middle of this new Cold War. You apparently were the beneficiary of Russian propaganda. Have you or anyone at your organization had contact with Russian intelligence or members of the Russian government in the past several years?
It's absolutely not. It's a ridiculous question. Of course we haven't.
Why is it ridiculous?
Why? Because we work on fracking for the very, very troubling impacts it's having on American health, safety, and welfare. It has nothing to do with what anybody else, when any foreign leader thinks about fracking. I don't know what Putin thinks about fracking. I don't care what Putin thinks about.
We do know what he thinks about the U.S. intelligence. Well, no, you do too. You're an American. You must have read the U.S. intelligence report on the Russian influence on the election, and it said the Russian government has mounted an anti-fracking campaign in the United States. It aired it publicly on RT, a bunch of documentaries. I'm sure you agree with them.
Listen,
and so it's a fair question. Were you hacked as well?
Absolutely not. I don't follow what Putin thinks about fracking. If you want to know what Putin thinks about fracking, perhaps you should talk to Rex Tillerson. He and ExxonMobil signed an agreement with Russian energy companies back in 2012 to start fracking in Russia. So I have no doubt that once the sanctions are lifted, that there will be fracking in Russia, and perhaps then Putin will be a fan of fracking because he'll be making money off of it. We focus on fracking. It's not a political issue for us. It's not a partisan issue for us. We focus on fracking because of the documented significant impacts that fracking is having on surface water, on air quality, on climate. That's why we work on fracking. Not for partisan reasons, not for political reasons. Putin's views on fracking are irrelevant to our efforts.
Okay, that's a fair answer, and to be totally blunt with you, I was asking half in jest because it points out the ludicrous nature of the debate we're having on Russia right now. Your views happen to align with Vladimir Putin's. It doesn't delegitimize your views, to be totally honest with you.
Right.
And I think that not all of your views are crazy, but I also think that energy extraction is always a mixed blessing. I mean, it's never all good. There's always some risk, but given that fracking, whatever risks it entails, has also basically made the United States energy independent and lowered the cost of energy for poor people in this country. There's a lot of goodness that comes out of fracking. Will you at least acknowledge that it's been really good for huge parts of the country and we're less dependent on the Saudis? Like, why is that bad?
No, it's another form of fossil fuel extraction.
Well,
it's been bad for this country.
By definition.
For example, in Pennsylvania in 2014, they released the results of 243 instances of groundwater drinking water contamination from the practice. If you look at Wyoming, Texas, Colorado, again in Pennsylvania, Dimmock, case after case after case of how fracking is impacting the health, safety, and welfare of Americans on a regular basis. A recent report last week just estimated out of the thousands and thousands of wells in this country that up to 17% of them are experiencing leaks on a regular basis.
Okay, and I mean, look, and I'm willing to stipulate that that's true. I mean, I think you're likely overstating it, but there are risks, and why wouldn't there be? There's risk in everything. My only point to you is, do you see the other side? So fracking is taking place in some of the most economically depressed regions of the United States, and there's no denying that the people living there, where it's been legalized, have really benefited from it. These places, there are no jobs in these places at all. Now, you live in New York City among rich people. Can you at least look out and say, yeah, there's been a real upside economically from fracking?
Those people should be given jobs in renewable energy systems, not in fossil fuel extraction systems. I think that we could all agree,
so
we should all agree, I think we should all agree that as a nation, as a world, as a planet, that we'd be better off if we were 100% renewable solar and wind as soon as possible, and we put aside our fossil fuel addiction. I think that's what we should be driving towards.
I get it, but as you know, since you follow this, we're literally nowhere near anything like that. There's no way to store that energy, as you know. So, like, could we just be real for a second? We'd all like to see wind and solar as the basis of our energy program, but we're not 10 years away from that. We're not 20 years away from that. So why can't we just say that out loud, or do we have to pretend it's going to happen tomorrow?
We're not 100 years away from that if we allow ExxonMobil and the other energy companies to dictate what our energy policies are in this country, which is what we've been doing. I mean, we look around this world and we see a country like a highly industrial country like Germany. July 25th, 2015, the summer of 2015, 2016, they achieved 78% of their electricity needs through pure renewable energy. Small developing countries like Costa Rica is up to 99% renewable. Even Uruguay is now at 95%.
That's totally. I mean, throwing Costa Rica in a non-industrial country like
I just raised Germany.
It's just
Germany
silly.
is an industrial nation. 78%. What I don't understand, though, Tucker, is you're a conservative. You believe in American exceptionalism. Why are we checking American exceptionalism at the door
No, I
when it
actually
comes
believe
to
in asking
renewable
straightforward
energy
questions and getting
generation?
non-polemical answers. And I think you're smart enough to just give me a straight answer, but you're not. Here's one. Here's a simple one. Where are you on nuclear power? No one has died.
We are against nuclear power.
Why would you be? Why would you be against? You know why? Because your donors are against it. There's no.
No, it's not because our donors are against it.
Then what's the reason?
The reason against nuclear power is because nuclear waste is highly toxic and dangerous. We want to see renewables. Nukes are not renewable power. We want to see solar. We want to see wind. We want to see geothermal.
There is a literally limitless supply of the energy that comes from nuclear power. So renewable doesn't play into it.
There's a limited supply of energy coming from the sun. I would rather see sunlight providing our energy systems.
But look, if you care about CO2 emissions, and presumably you do,
absolutely.
Nuclear power produces, let's see, none. It doesn't pollute if kept contained, and the amount of waste actually is negligible, and no one has ever died from it. So why would you be from a scientific perspective?
No one's ever died from nuclear power
in this country. I'm not aware of anyone who has.
Right, and it's a matter of time before we have more nuclear accidents.
It's been like 50
nuclear
years
waste buried out in.
I'm sure, but
why would we want to have radioactive waste as a byproduct of our energy system?
Deep in a salt mine because it doesn't hurt anyone?
When we can move to renewables. I mean, listen, I think what we can agree, I think that what the basis of our disagreement is how quickly can we get to renewables and how can we create the drive and the motivation to get there as quickly as possible. I don't think that tomorrow we're going to wake up Saturday and have 100% renewables in this country. But if we go down the path that we're going, well, we have a goal. My organization has a goal that we believe that we can get to 100% renewable energy in our electricity generating sector by 2035 if we put our minds to it.
Yeah.
And there are lots of
in the meantime, do you use cars or airplanes or anything like that? And if you do,
of course, we're not asking people to go back to the Stone Age and live in caves and light candles.
Saying, well, hold on, I'm saying not people. I mean you, who thinks that those things are destroying the planet. Why not opt out of them?
Listen, we don't believe that consumers are the problem here. We're not blaming consumers. I'm
asking about you, not consumers. You personally.
I am a consumer. I am a consumer.
Okay, but you also run this organization dedicated to getting rid of fossil fuels. So it's a fair question.
We are dedicated to getting rid of fossil fuels and replacing it with new energy sources. Not asking people and not asking myself to go out without energy and without electricity. We understand that we live in a current situation in which we rely on cars, we rely on fossil fuels because that's how the system is now structured. We're not saying to get rid of that tomorrow and shut down our fossil fuel production tomorrow. We're saying that we need to transition as soon as possible for the betterment of this planet and for our children and grandchildren to 100% renewables. It's a simple message.
Can I ask you one really last question?
Sure.
So you're worried about fracking. It runs through these pipes. It could contaminate groundwater. You live in New York City. There are countless sewer pipes and natural gas pipes commingled with water pipes. Are you worried about that? I mean, that seems like it would be a real risk, having human waste flowing next to your drinking water.
Right. That's why we also work on sewage treatment systems and Clean Water Act issues and lots of other issues.
You still got to have sewage pipes, right? You still got to have sewage pipes.
You absolutely do have to have sewage pipes until we come up to a better technology. Yes, we do when we work on it. The difference between sewage pipes and fracking pipes is sewage pipes are regulated, highly regulated under the Clean Water Act. Listen, it was no mistake back in 2005 when Dick Cheney and Halliburton and his buddies passed exemptions from literally every environmental law, every law in this country that heard the word clean, healthy, and safe in it for the fracking industry. That's not an accident.
All right. Scott, thanks for joining us tonight.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Good night.
Up next, a very brave professor went on Facebook and said refugees do not share the values of the West, and he doesn't want them in this country. The campus left flipped, but he's not apologizing. We'll talk to him next. Dan Demetriou is a professor at the University of Minnesota at Morris. He recently posted a critique of immigration on Facebook. He wrote that illegal immigrants, quote, are harmful to an economy about to automate, especially when it's a welfare state. Refugees are even worse, he said, because, quote, many adhere to a religious political cult with repulsive values. Angry students protested. One even called the comments, quote, an abuse of privilege. But the professor is not apologizing. He joins us tonight from Sweden, where he is on sabbatical. Professor, thanks a lot for joining us.
Hi, Tucker. Thanks for having me on.
So here's part of what you wrote about refugees. You said, and I'm quoting, no country has ever taken the current crop of refugees and made it work. No school with many refugees or illegals is a good school. None of their neighborhoods are safe. Not everyone has an extra $100 grand to avoid them. Pretty direct. What was the response to that?
Yeah, well, I wrote that during the heated moments after the president's first travel ban. Many of my academic friends were posting their own heated rants, and I thought I would provide some pushback. I felt that the narrative had somehow switched from wretched refuse yearning to be free to a more they're the best of us model. So I wanted to speak out a little bit and point out that, look, I mean, if we're taking refugees, this is an act of charity. This is something that we're probably taking a hit on. And we can't discount the hard work and often successful work we do as parents and educators of training up the next generation of Americans and act like somebody arriving on our shores who come from the worst circumstances in the world and who are taught views that are antithetical to our own is on average, prepared to be as good an American as our own children.
Right. And so what, I mean, considering you work at a university, I assume that others took you up in the spirit of open-minded academic debate on the issue, or tell me the response.
Yeah, no, I had about 2 or 3 days of very just vigorous but productive conversation on the issue on my Facebook post, on my Facebook page. I'm in Sweden, so I'm not talking to you personally, but you know, almost all my friends are on the left, and I, you know, love them, and we have a great time. But somebody took a screenshot of the post and lifted in isolation from the everything that my friends know about me and the other views that I have, and which are quite nuanced about the issues, circulated it, and including some faculty members circulated it, and even taught lessons with the screenshot anonymized in their classes. And so it sort of created a bit of a controversy on campus.
I bet it did. So you're in Sweden now. Is your time there confirming or refuting what you wrote on Facebook?
Well, confirmation bias is a worry, but it is confirming. I think there were 5 murders this week in Stockholm. The people I'm talking to in Sweden are very distressed about what's going on here.
Interesting. Dan, I'm amazed you didn't get fired for writing that. But thanks for joining us. And I'll be interested. I hope you'll come back when you get back from Sweden. I'd love to hear what you saw there.
Thanks, Tucker. Will do.
Coming up, what if we told you the federal government was spending billions and the effect was to kill 50,000 Americans a year? That's next. Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. It has been a wild week in the news. Republicans are already in a near civil war over the Obamacare repeal. The president has accused his predecessor of spying on him, perhaps illegally, and WikiLeaks humiliated the CIA. All these headlines have overshadowed a bunch of other stories, one of which we're going to open with tonight. As it happens, the effort to kill Obamacare is not the only contentious part of the new Republican health care bill. The American Health Care Act would also cut off federal funding for Planned Parenthood. That amounts to more than $500 million a year, about 40% of its budget. Planned Parenthood is the nation's largest abortion provider by far, so unsurprisingly, those who view abortion as the linchpin of human freedom are upset about it. The Trump administration says it will happily restore the funding to Planned Parenthood as long as it stops providing abortions. The group says it's not interested in that. Jimmy Green was a candidate in the recent race for DNC chair. She's also a former board member of Planned Parenthood Action Fund in New York City, and she joins us live tonight. Jimmy, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker.
So the Planned Parenthood line is that abortions are just a small part of what Planned Parenthood does, all the vital services they provide, and that's why they need federal funding. The Trump administration is saying, okay, then just don't provide abortions and you get your $500 million a year of taxpayer money. Why wouldn't they do that? If it's just a small part of what they do and the rest is so important, why not just get rid of the abortions?
Well, Tucker, I think we should start with being honest with your audience that there is no such thing as a federally funded abortion. There is a law that prohibits that from happening, and so that is certainly not something that Planned Parenthood supports as legislation, but they abide by it. Now, to your question of it's Planned Parenthood's line.
Since you moved off the topic, let me just ask you a question. If you didn't like the